One new study into the 2024 election finds voters in the U.S. are divided along religious lines. Former President Trump draws support from 81% of white evangelical Protestant voters and 61% of white Catholics. By contrast, 77% of black Protestant voters say that they are supporting President Biden. He also has support of 87% of atheist voters. For more analysis, we turn to Greg Smith, Associate Director of Research at the Pew Research Center. Greg, great to be with you again. We appreciate it. So tell us a little bit more about this study, especially the Catholic vote, and what stood out the most to you?
Well, what we see overall is that among Catholic registered voters, the balance of opinion right now tilts more toward Donald Trump than toward Joe Biden. Overall, 55% of Catholic registered voters tell us that they would vote for Donald Trump if the election were held today. That number rises to 61% among white Catholics, and support for Trump is lower among Hispanic Catholics. Hispanic Catholic registered voters are divided right down the middle. About half tell us they would vote for Joe Biden if the election were held today, and the other half tell us they would vote for Donald Trump.
Greg, and how does that compare to, say, other religions?
Well, if you compare Catholics as a whole to people in other religious groups, they tend to fall somewhere in the middle. We know that white evangelical Protestant voters are more supportive of Donald Trump compared to Catholics. White evangelicals are some of Donald Trump's strongest supporters. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we can see that black Protestants and voters who have no religion, atheists and agnostics, and those who tell us their religion is nothing in particular, those voters are more supportive of Joe Biden than are Catholics. So Catholics tend to fall somewhere in the middle, and that's pretty typical with what we've seen in recent elections.
Yeah, and Greg, now let's talk about the people who rated President Biden and former President Trump as great, good, average, poor, or terrible. What do the faithful have to say about that?
It's interesting. About a quarter of Catholics tell us that they think Joe Biden is a great president or a good president. Larger numbers of Catholics, more like half of Catholics, tell us that they think Donald Trump was a great president or a good president. Part of what you see there is that not just among Catholics, but among voters as a whole, Donald Trump's supporters are more likely to say that he was a great or a good president than Joe Biden supporters are to say the same about Joe Biden. So that explains some of the difference you see there.
Yeah, and I know you also asked about the former president and the charges related to the outcome of the 2020 election. What were the findings there?
It's interesting, lots of Catholics say that if the election were held today, they would vote for Donald Trump, but many of them also say they think he might have crossed the line in terms of attempting to change the results of the 2020 election. Something like 6 in 10 Catholics tell us they think Donald Trump either broke the law, attempting to change the outcome of the 2020 election, or he did something wrong, stopped short of breaking the law, but he did do something wrong. Smaller numbers, about a quarter of Catholics, tell us they don't think Donald Trump did anything wrong. And a lot of Catholics, like a lot of other voters, tell us they're just not sure. They don't know whether Donald Trump did something wrong or not.
Oh, Greg, quickly before I let you go, I know that you didn't include findings from groups like Jewish voters, but is there any indication how Jewish voters are responding to President Biden's handling of the Israel-Hamas war and also the on-campus protests that we've been seeing?
We don't have those data for Jewish voters. We're limited by sample size. We don't have enough Jewish voters in the latest survey to be able to talk about their views. We do know, however, that if you look historically over the long term, Jewish voters are some of the most strongly and consistently Democratic voters in the U.S. electorate. And that remains true today if we look, for example, at their partisanship. The big majority of Jewish voters continue to tell us they identify with or lean toward the Democratic Party.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on today and sorting all this out. We appreciate it.
Thank you again for having me.